Just before we get into this video, I do want this to be celebratory because of what it means to me, and it will be after this little segment, but I cannot ignore the events that has just happened about an hour and a half ago as of the time of this recording, and that is of course Christian Eriksen collapsing on the pitch in a game between Denmark and Finland at Euro 2020. From what I know right now, he is stabilised in hospital and awake, but I don't know any further as of this moment in time. But of course, all of my prayers and my thoughts are with him and his family. I can't imagine what they're going through right now. It must be absolutely horrendous to see this unravel. Get well soon, Christian. Hopefully he comes out of this okay. 1 year ago to this very day, I uploaded my first ever video to YouTube. Hey guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I definitely need a better introduction than that, to be quite honest with you. If you have any suggestions for introductions, just let me know. It's genuinely all over the place. Like, it's so jolty and jumpy because I thought it'd be a good idea to cut out basically every single breath that I took, and has no stop for the people watching to take stock of what's going on and actually get a chance to collect what they've just heard. And so yeah, it was a bit of a shoddy edit, must be said, but you know, it's the start of my YouTube career, and obviously it's a momentous moment for me, even if it wasn't the greatest of videos, of course, like most of my early videos, and I know most of my early videos are absolutely awful. Furthermore, I know in my early videos that I was really camera shy, and I kept on looking down my notes the whole time. I mean, obviously I do sometimes now to check that I haven't lost my way, but you know, when you're basically doing this the whole time and staring at your notes, it doesn't really come across very well. And of course, I have my camera shoved pretty much right in my face for the most part, which cannot have been a pleasant sight for. Of course, I do sometimes edits where I zoom in on my face and whatever, but that was genuinely, my camera was almost right here, and it just didn't look good. But yeah, 1 year ago, it was on the 13th of June 2020, my introduction to my channel was uploaded. I actually recorded this 8 days prior to it being uploaded, partly because I wanted to launch it at the same time as my podcast that I was doing, May the Tune In podcast rest in peace, but mostly because I was actually just too scared to upload it. I was petrified that it would go down like a lead balloon, especially since not many people I know are actually really interested in football. But thankfully, 1 year on, whilst I am still only on 44 subscribers, please do subscribe if you haven't done so already, I still haven't lost my love for writing scripts and recording and editing videos, and I do have a video that's over 400 views, and I know that's absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, but it's a step in the right direction, and hopefully we can keep this channel going and of course growing over the coming however long I continue doing this channel for. But thank you of course to everyone who's watched the video, be it for 2 seconds or for the entire way through. Your support means absolutely everything to me, and yeah, genuinely, thank you very much. To celebrate this milestone, I came up with a pretty simple idea, and that is my 10 favourite football matches that I have ever seen. Now, I won't include Man City 3 QPR 2 back in 2012 because A, it will be too obvious, and B, I've already made a video documenting my personal experiences on that day, although it is undoubtedly my favourite match from a subjective standpoint. But I thought I'd go with 10 other ones that I'd like to talk about, ordered chronologically and not in order of enjoyment. So without any further ado, let's celebrate 1 year of my channel by going through my 10 favourite football matches of all time, or actually just that I've seen. The first match I picked comes from 2006, and it is France 1, Italy 1, Italy winning 5-3 on penalties in the World Cup final that year. Of course I have to go for a game from the 2006 World Cup, since it was, after all, my first ever World Cup, and whilst going for the final might seem a little bit too obvious, it was a match which I invested myself in the most throughout the entirety of that tournament, which is pretty understandable considering it is actually the final, but you know, I still invested a lot in it. The events of that game, held in Berlin's Olympiastadion, are pretty well known, so I'll only briefly surmise them here. Zinedine Zidane, in his final professional game, scored a Panenka penalty in the 7th minute before Marco Materazzi equalised with a bullet header in the 19th minute. But in extra time, the 2 goal scorers were involved in a war of words that infamously resulted in Zidane headbutting Materazzi and being sent off, with the Italians then winning 5-3 in the subsequent penalty shootout. As a non-watching 7-year-old, this was the stuff of legends for me, and whenever something happened, I was bouncing around the living room, unable to contain my excitement, although I don't actually remember how I reacted to Zidane receiving his marching orders and walking past the World Cup trophy in one of the most poignant football images of all time. During penalties, I hid behind the sofa since I couldn't bear to watch it, even though I had no true affiliation with either nation, but simply because the tension was too great. I think that was the moment when I realised that football was the sport for me and that it would take me into its clutches irreversibly, and considering where I am now, I'm eternally grateful for it. My second game that I've picked is Portsmouth 2, Manchester City 1 on the 10th of February 2007, because I can't really not go with the first game that I ever saw in an actual football stadium, even though my team, Man City, lost the game, since I finally got to experience the magic of entering a football stadium surrounded by people who shared one love with you, that being your team, for the very first time. The game itself was actually pretty decent, as Pedro Mendes did what he always seemed to do against Man City and score a 25-yard thunderbolt, before Joey Barton injured Mendes with a terrible tackle later in the first half, yet was only shown a yellow card. This would come back to haunt Pompey later on, as Barton's cross was met by Bernardo Corradi to head home, one of just 3 goals he would end up scoring for City, but Kanu broke my heart in the 80th minute with a scuffed shot that squirmed through the goalkeeper, Andreas Isaacson. I remember constantly shouting at Isaacson whenever he had a goal kick to punt it long, whilst the other City fans were singing Blue Moon and going delirious when Corradi scored. But even though we lost, it was an unforgettable experience that was just too good to leave out. Weirdly enough, I've only been to 3 City games so far, and all the goals that they have scored during those games have been at the end where I was situated. So if you're at the opposite end to me at the stadium in the future, I can only apologise in advance. My third game is Ludwig Leisure Hurricanes 5, Hook FC 3, and I know what you're thinking straight away.
What the heck are these teams? I've never heard of either of them. How hipster a fan are you?
Don't worry, you're not meant to have heard of either of them unless you live in a very specific area of Hampshire, since Ludwig Leisure was the club that I played for between the ages of 8 and 10. Sadly, our team, named the Hurricanes, was dreadful, only winning I think it was 4 or 5 games all season and finishing in last or second to last place in the league, with defeats of more than 3 goals a game being pretty common. I was a striker during my first season there and was told to stay in the opposition's half at all times, which I took to such an extent that during one game, as a result of us constantly being on defence and me staying in the opposition's half at all times as per the instructions, I had to actually be substituted because I got hypothermia. However, everyone has at least one stunning game in them, and this one against our local rivals Hook in December 2007 was mine, as I bagged myself a hat-trick, including a pile driver from just outside the box that thundered into the roof of the net, and assisted another in a 5-3 win. I won the Player of the Match award, which I kept on my shelf for a good couple of weeks owing to a break in the season, and at the end of the campaign, despite missing a bit of it as a result of an ear infection, but still managing to score 14 goals in just under 30 games, I was named as the Players' Player of the Season. Still one of my greatest triumphs to date, especially considering how I am at football. We head forward to 2016 for my 4th pick, which is Stade Malherbe de Caen 3, FC Lorient 2, which is the best match I've ever seen in a football stadium. On my summer holidays, back when they were a thing, as a kid or as a teenager, my family would often head to Normandy in France to spend a month or so there, and we became invested in the local team Stade Malherbe de Caen, who, in 2016, were in Ligue 1. Since Caen's first match of the 2016-17 season against Lorient was at the Stade Michel d'Orlando, Caen's ground, my dad and I decided to buy some tickets for around 10 quid. English football, take note. And we found ourselves in the so-called cop section of the stadium, which, as you might have guessed by the name, was where the more fervent fans of Caen were situated. The atmosphere was intense and loud throughout, even when Caen found themselves 2-0 down within 20 minutes after a Benjamin Wukanjo brace, and it looked as though the match was already gone. However, on 26 minutes, Lorient midfielder Zargo Torre was sent off, and it seemed to motivate the Caen players and fans to believe that they could get something from the game. Ronnie Rodelin pulled one back just before the half-hour mark, before Croatian marksman Ivan Santini sent the Caen fans into raptures just before half-time with an equaliser, stabbing home from a corner to bring the scores level. Throughout the rest of the game, it was a case of whether or not Caen would be able to break down a stubborn Lorient back line, and in the 87th minute, Santini met a cross to power home the winner, and the crowd went absolutely berserk. Not only was the game phenomenal to watch from a neutral's perspective, but it was, for me at least, an experience unlike anything else I've ever had, as it felt natural to be caught up in the delirium, even though Caen aren't the team I majorly support, and the fans are rocking the place in a way that just doesn't happen all that often in top tier English stadiums. The match would also prove pivotal come the end of the season, as Caen stayed up by just 1 point ahead of, You guessed it, Lorient. Truly memorable. My fifth game comes from the 2018 World Cup, and it's the second round clash between France and Argentina, which ended 4-3 to France. And I have two words to sum up this game: Kylian Mbappe. Quite simply put, this is one of the finest individual displays I've ever seen from any player in one match, let alone from someone who was aged just 19 and playing in his first World Cup at that time. For the 2018 World Cup, I was actually based in France as a result of working in a hotel in the south of France for a few months as a placement, and I decided to watch the game in the hotel along with the clients and my fellow co-workers. Mbappe won a penalty early on after a blistering run that left the Argentinian defenders for dead, which Antoine Griezmann converted, but Argentina would then turn it around through a stunning Angel Di Maria strike and a Nicolas Otamendi toe poke. From then on, the French looked like a team possessed, epitomised through Benjamin Paval's 2B goal of the tournament to level the game up. Mbappe would score twice more with two extremely accomplished finishes, and both were met with even more pandemonium by the French fans, and Sergio Aguero's consolation goal proved to be too little, too late. It was a fantastic advert for the World Cup, a seesaw of a game that went one way and then the other, and for a neutral, it was brilliant to watch. But given the setting that I was in and being caught up in the moment, it made the match 100 times sweeter. My sixth game is Manchester City 2, Liverpool 1 on the 4th of January 2019. This was one of the first matches I ever really watched with a group of friends, and it was made all the better since they were all Liverpool fans, and it was great to get one over them. More than that though, it was a match that never lost its high intensity for 1 second, with both teams constantly looking to attack but being thwarted by their opposite numbers, not least Liverpool by Fernandinho, who put in his best performance in a City shirt, which, considering Fernandinho's usually high standards, says a lot. City was 7 points behind Liverpool at this point and needed a win to keep their title hopes alive, despite it being early January, and from minute 1, both teams were going at it hammer and tong, but Liverpool could have led early on if it wasn't for John Stones' last-ditch clearance off the line from a rebound off of Ederson, and apparently it was only 11mm away from going in. Just before halftime, Sergio Aguero kept up his record of scoring in every home game against Liverpool that he played in by thundering the ball into the roof of Alisson's net, but Roberto Firmino would equalise in the second half after a pullback from fullback Andy Robertson. City kept up the pressure and were rewarded when Leroy Sané smashed in a low drive off the post, and despite Liverpool's best efforts, they found Fernandinho and Bernardo Silva in inspired form, breaking down everything the Reds could muster, and the Blues held on to claim a famous victory in a true advert for the Premier League. City went on to win the league that season by just 1 point, making their win over Liverpool back in January all the more significant. My seventh game comes from the Champions League of the 2018-19 season, and more specifically, the round of 16 match between Real Madrid and Ajax at the Santiago Bernabeu, which finished 4-1 to Ajax. A dethronement like no other. I wish I could include Ajax versus Spurs in the semi-finals of that very competition, but sadly, I was otherwise busy and couldn't watch the game until the very moment that the final whistle blew, so I missed out on all of the drama, but I didn't miss out on another game involving Ajax back in the round of 16. Madrid already had a 2-1 away win going into the second leg, and few gave Ajax a chance, especially Sergio Ramos, Los Blancos' captain, who admitted to deliberately getting a yellow card in the first game between the two so that he could miss the second leg and prepare for the quarter-finals. They would never reach it. This was the game when everyone sat up and took Ajax seriously, as their young, energetic and hungry side put in a stellar performance at the home of the most successful team in European football history, with Matthijs de Ligt a rock at the back, Frenkie de Jong skinning through Real Madrid midfielders as though they weren't even there, and Hakim Ziyech, Dusan Tadic and David Neres causing mayhem all night. Those latter three players would each get on the score sheet, as Ziyech slotted home early on, Neres dinked the ball over Thibaut Courtois after some stellar work by Tadic to set him up, before the Serb would curl the ball into the top corner in the second half and make it 3-0 on the night to Ajax and 4-2 on aggregate. Marco Asensio would pull one back from Madrid, but towards the end, Lasse Schöne sent in a free kick from virtually the throw-in line, which looped over Courtois and landed in the net to give Ajax their fourth goal, and the Madrid players collectively lost their heads, with centre-back Nacho basically rugby tackling Donny van der Beek and being given his marching orders. It was a game for footballing purists to sit back and admire the drive and spirit of this Ajax squad and observe how far Madrid had fallen in just a few months following Cristiano Ronaldo's departure, and I sat there with my jaw dropped for the entire time at just how good that team was. Madrid's manager, Santiago Solari, would lose his job just 6 days later. My 8th game, quite pertinently, is Barcelona 2 Bayern Munich 8 in August 2020, and whilst it may seem harsh to include a game which included a true thrashing in my personal favourites, it was a sight to behold to see how much a once pure footballing establishment had come caving in on itself so spectacularly. In a one-off Champions League quarter-final owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, Bayern Munich, who themselves weren't great defensively in that game, ruthlessly exposed Barcelona's deficiencies and general lack of cohesion to stick 8 goals past them in a match that could have been 5-5, 10-3 or any other ridiculous scoreline for that matter. It was 1-1 within 8 minutes and 4-1 by half-time, as a David Alaba own goal was cancelled out by Ivan Perisic, Serge Gnabry and a Thomas Muller brace, and I half thought that the game had fizzled out from that point on, but boy oh boy was I wrong. Luis Suarez got a goal back on 57 minutes, and I said to my brother, imagine if Barcelona pull this back, it would be the greatest Champions League game ever, but it only served to wind up Bayern even more, as after spellbinding wing play from fullback Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich knocked in Davies' pullback to make it 5-2. Philippe Coutinho, on loan from Barcelona, then made a 15-minute cameo like no other, assisting 1 for Robert Lewandowski and then scoring 2 himself in one of the most humiliating results, if not the most humiliating result, in Barcelona's history. As I've said, even though it ended 8-2, it realistically could have been any scoreline with 10 plus goals in it, but the game itself was a true spectacle that deserved fans to be present in the stadium to witness it in person. Just maybe not the Barcelona fans, I think they might have nightmares from it for a while. My 9th game occurred just a few days after that Barcelona Bayern Munich game, and it is Sevilla 3 Inter Milan 2 in the Europa League final in August 2020. This game had me hooked from the get-go, as it proved to be one of the most memorable European finals in recent years. It had already reached boiling point within 3 minutes when Diego Costa brought down Romelu Lukaku in the box, but only received a yellow for what very easily could have been a red card offence, and Lukaku dusted himself down to score the resultant penalty, and the game became fiery, with many tackles coming in from left and right, and the intensity from both sides never waning. Former Newcastle flop Luke de Jong would flip the game on its head with 2 bullet headers, the second of which was just outstanding, but within 3 minutes of his second goal, Diego Godin tied it up with a brilliant header of his own. Whilst admittedly the second half didn't really live up to the general excitement of the first throughout its entirety, it was almost an impossible task anyway given how explosive those first 45 minutes were, but one more twist of the knife would follow in the 70th minute. Carlos, who of course was lucky to be on the pitch, saw his overhead kick, which was heading wide, deflected into his own net by Lukaku, and despite Inter throwing the kitchen sink at Sevilla in the closing stages, the Spaniards held firm to claim their 6th Europa League crown. I am a bit of a sucker for Europa League games, truth be told, but this one wouldn't have looked out of place in any competition, never mind UEFA's secondary tournament. My 10th and final pick for this video might surprise a few people, as it is the game between Manchester United and Leeds in December 2020, which finished 6-2 to Manchester United, because quite frankly, you just couldn't take your eyes off this game for the first whistle. If you went to get up a cup of tea or go to the loo or something, you'd probably have missed a couple of goals by that point. It was the first match between the two rivals in the Premier League since 2004, and they made sure that it would be a game that no one watching it would forget in a hurry. Scott McTominay suddenly turned into prime Thierry Henry, showing great attacking power and movement to score twice within the first 3 minutes, and at that moment, my dad and I looked at each other stunned, wondering what on earth would happen over the next 87 minutes. What it had was a grand total of 43 shots, 26 from United and 17 from Leeds, and non-stop movement, focus and tenacity from both teams, resulting in a thoroughly entertaining game that should have seen much more than the 8 goals that were legitimately scored. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about that match though was that even when Leeds were 4-1, 5-1 and then 6-1 down, they never gave up and never lost heart, playing as though they were only 1-0 down in the 90th minute and their lives depended on it, a trait which eventually saw them climb to 9th by the time the Premier League season had concluded. Simply put, I couldn't move from my sofa throughout the whole game in pure anticipation of what might happen, and it was definitely a worthwhile way to spend a Sunday afternoon and procrastinate from uni work. And that just about wraps up today's video looking at what I believe are my 10 favourite football matches of all time. Of course, thank you so much again for all of your support over the past year. I really hope that it continues to grow and continues to improve over the next year or so. As I said at the start, if you did enjoy it, of course, hit the like and the subscribe button if you have not done so already. But of course, just before I wrap it up again, my thoughts are, of course, with Christian Eriksen. I hope that he recovers. I hope that he comes out of this okay. And yeah, it's just a horrible sight to see in any circumstance. All the best to Christian Eriksen, all the best to his family and friends, and of course the Danish national team squad, who I cannot imagine what they're going through right now. But yeah, all the best to him, and thank you very, very much for watching this particular video. And until next time, I'll see you then.